Welcome to all of you as we begin this holy discussion on immortality and the secrets for unlocking this code that allows us to be in that natural state which has always been true to the soul. And this is the key. We're going to be talking about this the entire time. The secret to immortality is that which you believe or want to be immortal is not. It's not that it's not immortal. It's neither immortal nor mortal. The separate self, the split identity, the ego self that we so often think, well, I want my body to be immortal. I want to be able to live forever. This separate identity that we claim, not only is it not immortal, it's not anything. It doesn't exist. And it's this experience, and I say experience because it is an experience. It's something that washes over us and expands within us until we are the full vibratory frequency of that experience, that the truth within me, my soul, is neither born nor can die. And it's this understanding, this experience that leads to immortality. So we're going to be talking today about the 5 pillars of immortality. And it's interesting when you realize that for thousands of years, many esoteric paths and alchemists and teachers have been seeking this secret. Hundreds and even thousands of years ago, Taoists would come up with elixirs that would have even things like arsenic in it, seeking a drink that they could, some sort of concoction that they could drink that would make them immortal. And in fact, many of them died even trying to do that. That's the insanity of the ego. In trying to find this immortal elixir, they actually killed themselves. Or spiritual masters would come up with ceremonies and rituals to try and unlock this code, when the code or the secret is always right in front of us. And that's what we're going to discuss today. The 5 pillars of immortality. So let's just dive right in. We'll begin with the very first one. And yes, these came to me yesterday as I was doing my walking meditation here in my anchor hold. And it was such a powerful experience, I had to immediately get my phone and write all these down. So what I'll do is I'll share each one of them one at a time, and then a little bit about the core of each one as we go. So here is the first pillar for immortality. The self continues to reincarnate until there is no self left. Once again, the self, and we say that with a small s, the self-identified you will continue to reincarnate, continue to be reborn until there is no self-concept of you, no self. The self that can be born is not the true self. Until this is realized, the separate self is born over and over until the realization of no self-identity is attained. This is the foundation. Yes, we do think of reincarnation as being continually born, and we think that this is a cycle of realization, that I'm going to continue to be reborn until my soul has learned all the lessons it needs to learn, and then I won't be born again, which is true to a certain extent. But the only lesson that you're here to learn is that the self you have identified is not. Because the truth within you cannot be identified. The truth, your soul, your I am presence, the all that is, cannot be identified as one thing. And this is why it says that when you achieve that state of no self, when the self-identity has been dissolved, this is the first step into realizing immortality, which will lead us into the second pillar. Immortality cannot be achieved, only realized. What can this mean other than the truth within you, who you really are, is already immortal, but we have denied that truth. We've run away from that truth and hidden in a self-identity. We've hidden in an idea or a concept that was never true. So what I wrote yesterday was, the separate self is neither mortal nor immortal. It is nothing. That may feel very awkward for us at the beginning when we realize on a deep level that the self, the me that I've identified as me, is neither mortal nor immortal. It's nothing. It's like a shadow. Is a shadow a thing, or is it a no thing? This is saying the exact same thing. So once again, the separate self is neither mortal nor immortal. It is nothing. When this is realized, the true or the immortal self emerges, and the separate self fades like a shadow disappearing in the light. It may feel awkward to realize that the you that you've identified is nothing more than a shadow, or literally the manifestation of blocked light. The manifestation of blocked light. Can you imagine that? Who you think you are, that shadow, like any other shadow, fades and disappears when the light is turned on at its brightest level. And that's all we're doing here, is we're allowing this light to shine at the highest and brightest level possible. So once again, immortality cannot be achieved. It can only be realized. The truth can only be realized. Let's move on to the third pillar. Now, before I read this is very important. In most cases, traditionally, and maybe for each one of you, when we think of being immortal, what we usually associate with is the idea of an immortal body. That me in this form, I'm somehow going to achieve this state of immortality, and I'm going to live forever as this identity in this body. Well, the third pillar speaks very directly to this when it says, being the symbol of death, immortality of the physical body is impossible. Impossible. It's the antithesis of what immortality is. All physical bodies emerge from the separate self, and this is very important. They emerge from the separate self seeking to prove separation real. Once again, your body emerged from the separate self, the identity, the ego, seeking to prove that separation is real. When the illusion of separation dissipates, the physical body is no longer required. So immortality has nothing to do with the physical body or even the you that you think you are, but the release of all of these concepts into the reality of the truth of you with a capital Y that has never and can never change. So once again, the third pillar is being the symbol of death. Immortality of the physical body is impossible. Don't try. Just let that go completely. And that moves us on to the fourth. Now we're getting into the good stuff. The immortal self can be realized through a consistent dissolving of the identified self, revealing the sun at the very center. The sun at the very center. Now, I'm going to read a little bit more here in a moment, but I want you to imagine the you that you've identified as a salt person, a person made of salt. Excuse me. And at the very core, at the very center of this salt person that you've created, there is a light that is brighter than 1,000 suns. And yet this salt contains, and this salt person that you claim hides that sun. Now, I want you to imagine that salt person lying at the edge of the ocean, with the gentle waves slowly washing in and washing out and washing in and washing out. And every time those gentle waves move over this salt person, a little bit more of that salt is released into the infinite ocean. And then the next wave, a bit more, until finally, through consistent practice, that sun at the very center is released revealed and explodes in immortality. This is what it means to be immortal. And it says here, the separate or identified self was created by a single thought of guilt. A single thought of guilt, not from a traditional guilty religious sense, because it says next that a thought of guilt for something that never actually occurred. Through prayer and meditation, initiating high states of ecstasy, this self, or this salt person, slowly dissolves. Through prayer and meditation, initiating high states of ecstasy. Every time those waves gently wash over the salt person, a new state of ecstasy is revealed as we're stripped from all of those protective boundaries, the armor that we use to hide that sun at the very core. So once again, number 4 is the immortal self, who you really are, can be realized through a consistent dissolving of the identified self, revealing the sun imprisoned at the very center of your being. Okay, let's move on to number 5. We're going to continue with this thought of ecstasy, this experience of ecstasy, because it's the ecstatic state of dissolving, of that separated self dissolving into that infinite ocean that reveals our immortality. So number 5 is, when the highest state of ecstasy is reached, the sun at the core of one's being is released, and here's the key, initiating an ascension experience. Initiating an ascension experience. Now, what does that mean? In some traditions, it is believed that when that is ascension experience, when the sun is finally fully revealed, there is what is called a flash out. That light, that brilliant, radiant light at the core of our being flashes so bright that the you that you claimed, which was never real, as it dissolves, it flashes out, and you could say is no more, but that sounds a bit harsher than we want it. It would be better to say that the truth, which has always been true and real, is finally released, and there's no need for that separate self-identity. And when that flashing out occurs through that ecstatic state, the you that you claimed not only never was, is no longer, but never was. In some traditions, it's believed that when someone flashes out, time and space fill in instantaneously. It fills in to the point that if, this is not exactly how it is, it's a metaphor, but it's one way of understanding it. If you were standing next to someone who initiated that ecstatic experience of full release, revealing the sun at the core, and that flash out occurred, you would not only not realize that they had flashed out, but you would not realize or believe that they were ever there. Because once again, the you that you've identified is the block to the awareness of the presence of love, which is what that flashing out is. So this is not something to consider in a negative way, because the whole experience here is that the you that you believe yourself to be is not. And all we're doing is dissolving that, like the salt person, to unleash and reveal that light in the very center. So what I wrote here was, when the final ecstatic state is attained, the true self is released in a flash of radiant light, and the separate self is fully and finally dissolved. This is the essence of immortality. So once again, immortality has nothing to do with the body, because the body is nothing. Immortality has nothing to do with your identity, your split self, because your identity is nothing. Immortality is happening already. It simply needs to be realized through a consistent, ecstatic practice, revealing the core, the light, the sun at the center of who you are as you dissolve into that infinite ocean and flash out into this radiant experience of eternal light. And then the you that you thought you were is no longer needed, because the you that you thought you were was nothing more than a defense or an attempt to prove separation real. And why would you continue to do that when you know this now, when you know that there is a reality beyond this unreality that you really want, that you can claim this very moment? Because the truth is, you are not a separate person living in a body. This is what you've always been told. This is what you've accepted. This is what is true to the separate self. That it believes that you are a separate person living in a body, but it's not true. Then who are you? You are the infinite awareness itself, having an individualized human experience. The infinite awareness itself, having an individualized experience which you no longer require. You no longer need. Because here's the real secret. All of these pillars come down to this single secret. The secret of immortality is the full, uncompromising realization that you are soul, not a person. That you are soul, not a person, not an identity. Now, notice that I didn't say that you are a soul, because that would be a compromise to that split self. And once again, this is the uncompromising realization. There is only one soul, and you are it. Once again, this soul may be having an infinite number of individualized human experiences, because the infinite always seeks to know itself through infinite forms and infinite experiences in infinite ways. But it never takes away from the fact that the infinite is one. That there is no your soul, my soul, another soul. There's only one soul. You are not a person. You are not an identity. And it's the full realization of that uncompromisingly that allows that salt person to dissolve and for the sun to be revealed. So just to recap, you are immortal now. And the moment that you stop trying to force a split, separate idea that never was true into this experience of immortality, the moment you seek instead to be dissolved through those ecstatic states of awareness, the more that core, radiant light or sun at the center of your being is fully revealed. And then you know, you don't believe, you know, I am that. I am immortal, with capital letters. You see, the ego wants to believe that I am immortal, meaning with small letters, a small I, a small a, and a small m. I am immortal, but that can never be, because the I am that you claim, that we all claim, the split self, the separate reality, isn't. But the truth of who you are is, always has been, always will be. And it's time for this flash out. It's time for this revealing, the great reveal. It can happen in an instant, this great dissolving. So as always, we have a bit of an unusual session today because I went a little bit longer than normal, but Vicky always just has a way of just coming right into this and adding just the most perfect experiential support. So I'm going to turn it over to Vicky now and ask her to share a little bit on this subject. And by the way, Vicky she knew what the subject was, but she didn't know any of the details of this. So she's just going to speak right from the top of the mountain from her own immortal self. Hi, Vic.
Hey, Jimmy. Well, if I could, I would just sing because singing is the prayer twice. But what has occurred to me is simply realizing that all effort goes to desire. All our efforting, all the effort we put into anything goes to some desire, which is some aspect of our identity. And instead of living by fulfilling our efforts, if we live in that abiding state of welcome and wonder, and I don't know what anything is, then, and we resist not. So that's what I would say the guidelines for me would be, to resist nothing, because like the salt that's going to merge back into the sea, or I thought of kids making sandcastles, lots of sandcastles that just go right back to the ocean, to the ground. If we don't resist and we abide, and that's what I feel I'm being called to anyway, right now, as a way of opening up and letting those shields and covers of our soul be dissolved. To abide and with awareness, with that awareness and wonder and non-resistance, awareness, wonder, and non-resistance, I would say, right? And then let everything go, especially when we want to effort and hold on to something, whatever it is, our bodies, our lives, our work, our relationships, whatever. Just watch ourselves without putting in the effort, and in the watching and in the awareness. And the business of welcome and wonder for me is very important, because it reestablishes the eternal peace that I know never wavers, that eternal joy. So no matter what I'm looking at, a body falling apart, a house falling apart, relationships falling apart, I wonder what it all means. It's like, oh, I'm so excited. Even if I'm upset, my attention goes to the wonder, not to the upset. And that's the point of choice that we all have. That's what we're all ready for. We are ready to choose wonder rather than worry or efforting or concern.
Yes.
That's all. But I do want to mention one thing. In one tradition, as many of us know, Mary was assumed into heaven. And that was one of those experiences of light. And Jesus actually, in the text of the Course, talks about his body didn't do anything because there was nothing left that he was clinging to as an identity. So it simply faded away, like the salt fading away into the ocean. So I don't know how that works in time, whether the collapse of time erases the memory. It certainly didn't erase the memory of Mary. It communicated it. So I don't know if it erases, or in the communication of soul, of natural communion, it lifts the awareness of what we are. And our attention goes to that rather than to the coverings that our desires have restricted us to. So I don't know. That's what. Thank you, though. Thank you for those little pillars.
As always, Vicky, that was just absolutely perfect. And I love that you emphasize awareness, wonder, and non-resistance. That's like the key going into the lock and the tumblers falling into place. To be aware, to be in wonder, and to not to resist anything. Because it's my resistance that builds more and more salt layers over this core light. As I resist, I'm trying to protect. But as I enter into a state of non-resistance, slowly and consistently, without compromising, those layers begin to dissolve until the core. And Teddy just put up there that today is the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. I didn't know that. Speaking of Mary, which leads to the Assumption. But let's look at Immaculate Conception for a moment. From a Catholic perspective, people sometimes think that it refers to the Immaculate Conception of Jesus. It does not. It refers to the fact that, or the conception, that Mary was conceived without original sin, okay, in order to birth the Christ. Now, that's interesting because I think it was Meister Eckhart who once said that we must become like Mary and give birth to the Christ. In other words, we cannot give birth to the Christ unless we realize that we were conceived immaculately as well. Because this idea of original sin or original stain, this is what I was talking about before with guilt. The guilt is that somehow I committed a sin by attempting to separate from that which is inseparable. And so this original idea has remained at the core of my identity, of my separate split self, and has always influenced everything that I've done. But the key to this ascension process of immortality is the realization that that which I think I'm guilty for in reality never occurred. It never occurred. And so as Mary was conceived without sin, I too and you too are the immaculate conception, the immaculate concept, where all concepts fade and all concepts disappear. This is what it means to be immortal. Your immortal self fully realized through an uncompromising decision to seek only what is true and to whisk away anything that is not.